Welcome to our live meditation. And a special welcome to those of you who've joined us through Sounds True. It's best not to have any expectations about the form of this meditation. Just allow this moment to be as it is, and you'll notice that we've started already with our meditation. Meditation is really all about becoming still, without going to sleep. Well, let me correct what I just said. It's not so much becoming still, but being still. Becoming would imply that you have to go somewhere or do something. Being is already here and now. And in a sane life, a conscious life, a harmonious life, there needs to be a balance between becoming and being. Becoming is doing things, getting things done, and so on in this world, dealing with things, creating things, achieving things. And being is about being aware of the present moment. Which, after all, is all you ever have. Whatever you achieve through becoming in the future eventually turns into the present moment. So, as I speak to you, the meditation, if we even want to call it that, it's perhaps best to forget about the word. As I speak, be aware of the silence or the stillness between the words. Being aware means just notice that it's there. It's very simple. So you notice that in addition to the words, there's another dimension that is easily overlooked, and that's the dimension of stillness, which we could also call space or spaciousness. So when you notice that there are two, so to speak, two dimensions here, the dimension of words, which you hear and which then become thoughts in your head, and the dimension of no thing, spaciousness. And you just notice, that's all that's required, that there is that dimension also present, so you notice it in between words and even behind the words, so to speak. Now when you notice it, what happens inside you? What does it mean to notice the stillness? Be aware of the stillness. It means you have become still inside. It means you are conscious, but at that moment, at this moment, you're not thinking. But you're alert, present, completely here, but not thinking. So, that's the realization of the dimension of depth within you. And without that realization, your entire life is a surface phenomenon. You run around on the surface of being, never satisfied for long, frustrated, almost always feeling there's something important missing in your life. And of course there is. But you can't find it on the surface of your life. The horizontal dimension, looking here and there. You have to not become still, but realize that that dimension of stillness is already in you. And another word to describe it is to say it's this alert presence that you can sense right now. And you may find the mind wanting to come in from time to time and say something about it, or even deny it, or say, I don't understand it, or say, what's the point? I have other problems to worry about. I'll become still when I have solved all the other problems. But why people experience, many people, most people experience their life as a succession of problems and ultimately a frustrating experience is because they haven't discovered that dimension, the most vital thing or no thing to discover within yourself. That stillness is also power. It's the source. Not only of yourself, it is the source of life. And nothing creative can ever come into your life if you're not connected with that. Whenever you feel joy, for a moment perhaps, in your daily life, or a moment of loving interaction with another human being or an animal, or when you suddenly see beauty somewhere and you go, oh, Now, without you necessarily being aware of it, there has arisen a moment of stillness in you, if only 3 seconds, or perhaps a bit more. And it's only there that the joy of life arises, or the ability to really connect with another human being. Without it, without the stillness, you have only your conceptual mind. Thinking, and you relate to the world through the conceptual mind, judging, thinking, judging, interpreting continuously. The inner self-talk, the monologue, which may become a dialogue in your head. "You're no good," says one voice. The other one says, "But I'm trying. Whatever the voice in your head is doing, and then you try to relate to another human being through that. And before long, concepts come in, judgments come in. So there's always a sense of insufficiency, of lack, of not enough. There's always conflict arising when the dimension of stillness is not at all operating in your life. Or very briefly, it's not enough. Yes, it's good if you can occasionally experience joy and a sense of aliveness and see beauty and a loving feeling towards another human being, not the egoic love, but a goodwill flowing out towards another human being. Yes, it's wonderful, but if it's only brief moments, then yes, at least that keeps you going. But it could be much deeper. It could operate in your life continuously so that you never lose touch with it. But the first step is realizing it's there always. It's already there. It's already here. I wrote in the little book called Stillness Speaks, I said, you are never more truly yourself than when you're still. And you might think that's a strange statement. most people, when they talk about myself, talk about their personal history and their personal problems and their life situation. When they talk about myself, that's what they refer to. They refer to my relationships, my work situation, my financial situation, my home situation, my health. Me and my life. And of course, all that that is the case. But is that who you really are?
This is Sarah from California. Sarah, please join us and share your question with Eckhart.
Hello, Mr. Eckhart Tolle.
Hello, Sarah. Hello.
My question for you today is, how do I, as an awakening soul, keep faith in manifesting global and personal love, peace, and harmony at this time when there's so much chaos, corruption, fear, and a lot of hate, actually, and anger among the global population and among those close to me? In other words, how do I not fall into the darkness of fear and separation from my source, from my essence, and from separating from others, and remembering that, as you say, it is not personal, it is not who they are. How do I use conscious manifestation to achieve that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. To use the term manifestation in a wider sense, one could say that you manifest the way in which you experience what you might call reality or your life. You could call it your life, you could call it reality. How do you experience it? And to what extent are you dependent upon external conditions as far as your state of consciousness is concerned? How much freedom do you have? Can you live peacefully in a world that is, to a large extent, not peaceful? And if that is possible, how do you do that? How do you not get drawn into the conflict and anger, egoic dysfunction of the world, egoic, both individually egoic and collectively egoic? Let's start by looking at, to some extent, it might be helpful as a starting point to differentiate between what would conventionally be called your life. This is whatever in your daily experience of people that you interact with, whatever you do in this world, work situation, family situations, meeting people here and there, going from here to all your private sphere. There's that. So you meet all kinds of people, some familiar people, some people that you meet briefly, have interactions with in then you have in this technologically advanced society, you have another, well, not everybody, but most people have another level of interaction with other people that also becomes part of what they call my life. And that is interaction through technology. You interact through social media with more people than you actually know. This is the case with many people these days. They interact with more people than they actually know in their normal everyday existence. You interact with all kinds of people that you've never met. Not everybody, but most these days, because people use Facebook and they use Twitter and they use all kinds of things. They're sending messages and so on. And on social media, you also interact with people in a different way that you haven't. So look at then the third level. So we have actual personal contact with people, and whatever the nature of this these interactions is. It could be, is it conflict-ridden? Is it conflict-ridden or is there some conflict, but also a certain amount of harmony in your daily life? Then you look at the other level of social interactions through the media, through social media. What kind of interactions do you have there with people that you might never have met, but nevertheless you are in contact with them, you exchange? What is the quality of that kind of interaction that you have? How much conflict is there? How much negativity is there? And how much is there that is a manifestation of consciousness? You have to look at that. Many people there are people, as you sure you know, there are many, especially younger people, but others too. There are many people in this world for whom the human interactions that they have through technology are much more important than the actual interactions they have with human beings. They interact through social media with countless people, and the virtual world becomes to them more important than their actual surroundings. It's an amazing thing. I don't believe that is a very helpful thing, but that's how it is. It's a huge challenge. So you have that level. Then you have another level where you come in contact with the world through what we might call mainstream media. You get the news and you get commentaries. And mostly these days, the news and commentaries are mixed up. They come in one. You can't just get the news anymore. Then you already have the news already embedded in a commentary. And you get also that third level becomes also for many people almost more important than their daily existence with the people that they actually know and interact with. Sometimes, of course, those levels can meet. For example, you hear in the news about people going into stores and not wearing their masks,
And then there's a lot of upheaval about that, and people get worked up about this and very angry. And you can see little clips of people shouting at each other because somebody's not wearing a mask, and then the other person is shouting something back. And to some extent, there can be that level, and the personal level can meet, because 10 minutes later you go into the store and you might witness something similar. But your experience of reality or your world consists of these levels. So you have to look at these. For a moment, I think I can try to perceive those three levels. First of all, it's important not to lose touch with the fact that level one, where you have actual human interactions with people in your daily life, which is relationships that you have, people you work with, people you meet casually, but actual human interactions, that really is the main part, or should be the main part of your life, should be that the actual living experience. And so what I'm recommending is that you see if you can separate those levels and look at the primordial level of your actual experience with human beings, leaving aside for a moment social media and leaving aside watching the news every day and all the other things connected with the news, whatever. Leave that aside for a moment. It's important to see the difference. So when you talk about negativity and destructiveness and all anger and antagonism and conflict everywhere, first of all, look at your life, your actual life. Does that apply there? Or to what extent does that apply there? Because that's an important part of your reality, is the reality that you create, that you manifest in your personal life. That is primary, I would say. Is that sometimes, of course, the reality that you see in mainstream, the media, when you watch the news, sometimes the two meet. As I said before, they can meet. But so first of all, take responsibility for you need to take responsibility for your life here on the level of personal interactions. That's where it starts. And that's where you can do a lot of good and you can do harm too. Do you contribute there to human unconsciousness? Or do you contribute there to the awakening of humanity? Every encounter with another human being, whether it's a person you've known for a long time, family member, spouse, whatever it may be, or whoever it may be, every interaction with true interaction, not talking about social media, every interaction with another human being is important. What is the quality of your consciousness as you interact with actual human beings, not ciphers on the screen? They've expressed an opinion and then you attack this. But actual human beings, what's the quality of your life on that level? What is most likely happening right now, we need to be aware of that. It is true that there is an increase in the collective at the present time of what we might call dysfunction or disorder or even chaos, disruption. We are entering, or we have already entered collectively, a time period of collective disorder or disruption or chaos. There are time periods that they fluctuate. It's always there. It's true that the media actually is part of it. They don't just report it. They amplify the disruption and the chaos, unfortunately. I'm not blaming anybody there. Some people say there's all some evil plan behind it all. Maybe there is, who knows, some conspiracy theories, maybe 1 out of 10 conspiracy theories that actually be true, but we don't even need to go there. The fact is that the mainstream media is part of the disorder that is increasing disorder in this world. And my feeling is there's more to come. So be spiritually prepared. Very important. Be spiritually prepared so that you do not become part of the disorder that's happening, and increasingly, I believe, going to happen even more in this world. We are moving, the world always moves between order and chaos. There are two polarities. You should always strive for order. That's important in your life, in the world, but realize the world, for its evolutionary progress, also needs chaos, periods of chaos and disorder. And out of chaos and disorder, a new order develops. And so there's a gradual evolution of consciousness. When there is disorder, there is a regressive movement, and which means most people become relatively more unconscious. And in the present time, anybody who is not awakening, even to some extent spiritually, will be drawn into deeper unconsciousness because they become part of the collective movement towards disorder or chaos when structures dissolve. And that is a challenge for humans. Now, especially for you, everybody I'm talking to, and many others, of course, it is your challenge to stay conscious while this is happening, so that you do not become contaminated by the collective negativity and unconsciousness. It doesn't mean that you necessarily need to completely withdraw from the world. You can still attempt, to the best of your abilities, to create a better world. If you have whatever your sphere of influence may be, see if you can bring in more consciousness into whatever you do, whoever you're in contact with. Be a bringer of consciousness. You bring consciousness into an unconscious world without creating some mental conceptual image. I am the bringer of consciousness, then you're lost in ego again. So, but be prepared for increasing challenges in the collective. Do not be drawn into reactivity, and do not be hypnotized by these events when you watch what's happening in the media and so on. Stay present. What you're watching is an evolutionary story. Humanity is displaying, probably entering a regressive period, as they sometimes happen before there's a further awakening of consciousness. We are perhaps, I'm not for sure, but there's a good chance we're entering a regressive period, which is perfectly fine. It's what you're watching is the evolutionary growth of the human species. And so they are manifesting whatever behavior corresponds to the particular stage in the evolution of humanity. The evolution is towards more consciousness. That's for sure.
So if you discover within yourself that a lot of the time you're in a state of lack, of insufficiency, of not enough, and you feel that the answer to, the remedy is to be active in this world and achieve and do as much as possible, then you'll probably find that ultimately that is not the answer to your state of lack. In order to transcend, to go beyond your state of lack, of neediness, of not enough, spiritual practice and spiritual realization is necessary. Focus on the realization of being. It's only there that you can go beyond that state of lack, which is ego. Go within and discover who or what you are beyond the person.
Hi, Eckhart. My question has two parts. It's what is the purpose of mental illness? How can something that is consciousness depriving have its necessary place and function?
Okay. Somebody, or perhaps it was me, probably said that everything has its necessary place.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Now, in the larger context, if you look around the world, it's not only mental illness, which exists in different gradations, mental illness in its acute form, where it is recognized as mental illness in its less acute form, where we call it neurosis, whatever. And mental illness, well, neurosis already is normal. So mental illness in its normal form, which is normal human consciousness, the world is full of seemingly consciousness blocking events, all the suffering. You say, what purpose could that possibly have? For example, you could say, what purpose could human beings killing each other in the 20th century alone, human beings killing not 100 million, as I said in The Power of Now, that was a mistake, I've realized later, but closer to 170 million people killed in the 20th century alone, humans killing other humans. 170 million. Nobody knows the exact figure, but that's 170 million killed. What purpose can that possibly have? You can ask also. That's all that suffering can't possibly have a purpose, can it? And then all the other things that you have. Young children dying in accidents or illnesses, or all kinds of things that seem to be blocking consciousness, people trapped in dreadful conditions, slave-like conditions still in many parts of the world, and it was like that until recently even in the Western world, trapped and not totally deprived of freedom. All these things that seem to block the arising of the flowering of consciousness. Particularly if you look at it in isolation. But it does seem that, first of all, a misperception arises when we look at a human being as if he or she were an entirely autonomous entity. In other words, as if he or she, the life that he or she has were his or her own life. Because then you see, you then look at everybody as an autonomous life form without realizing that all life forms and all humans are a temporary expression of the one life. The life in you, or the consciousness in you, is the consciousness in me, the same consciousness, expressing itself in a different form. And there is something happening in this universe which is consciousness coming into the world of form and expressing itself more and more fully through the world of form. But it is always the one consciousness, assuming billions of life forms constantly. But the human thinks, that's me, that's my life. No, it's life. It's not my consciousness. I don't have my consciousness. It's the one consciousness, the one in the many. So all life is one. So when something seemingly dreadful happens, on one level it is always dreadful. Nobody can say that humans killing 180 million of their fellow humans is not dreadful on that level. But if you go to a deeper level, you see that something is emerging, and for some reason it is through, in many cases, seemingly being blocked here and there, that the consciousness is emerging more fully. That also has its place. You can't see it when you look at individual cases, but when you look at the totality of consciousness wanting to emerge, yet finding seemingly obstacles everywhere. But it's through the obstacles that the flowering actually happens. And so you might say, oh, isn't it unfair that this person represents a greater obstacle than another person? But it's the essence of any person is the one consciousness. So nothing is lost ever. And in so-called mental illness, there's also something to be learned by the one consciousness. What it is, I don't know, but I do know that a certain percentage of mental illnesses are a rising of consciousness that has gone slightly wrong, that hasn't gone, or is unrecognized. There are people in India who have become saints and masters who would have been put in a mental home in the West, because the West doesn't recognize certain things, that's this spiritual rising. Unfortunately, they were not born in the West, but there are probably many people in the West. I'm not saying that all mental illness is a misinterpretation, a non-recognition of awakening process, but ultimately everything is part of the awakening process. And why do I know all these things? You know things by looking at your own life, and I know that all the things that seem to block the full arising of consciousness in my life, and I'm sure you can find the same in your life, all the seeming obstacles to living a life of fullness and ease and greater awareness, ultimately all those things actually led to the arising, to the awakening. When I look at my own life, and my own life is only a microcosm of the collective, it must be, then I see all the blockages and all the suffering actually was part of the awakening, without which it would not have happened. And collectively, the suffering of humanity in so many forms is also, unfortunately, a necessary part of the awakening. But realize that what we see as somebody's personal identity is not who they are. They are an expression of the one which is constantly finding new channels through which to express itself in this world. So if this channel is blocked, we see it as a person who is suffering. That's also true on one level. And of course, you help if you are there, you give whatever help you can, that's part of it. But there's that personal sense of self is ultimately an illusion, because who you are is ultimately timeless and beyond the person. So I know that if I had not encountered all these seeming blockages in my life, I wouldn't be sitting here now. And if you had not suffered what you suffered, you wouldn't be here now. And so the obstacles to the arising of consciousness are ultimately part of the arising consciousness. And there's only one life. And that's a liberating thing to know, that the life in you, the life in me, is the one life. And if I die at this moment, nothing is really lost. If you die, nothing is lost. So we need to get away from the misperception that you have your life and it's a unique thing, and you are an expression of the one, and everybody is. And so humanity as a whole is awakening. And there's a term in the Bible which says the birth pangs of the new age. The birth pangs, when before giving birth there's a pain. So these are the birth pangs of the awakening. And it all, if you could see the totality, that also would make sense. It doesn't mean that it's killing 180 million is okay. Recognizing that it is insanity is part of the awakening. The recognition of that as insanity, that collective part of the collective insanity, that's part of the awakening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you believe in the law of attraction and manifestation?
Where is this coming from? Do I believe in the law of attraction and manifestation? I want to say yes, and I want to say no, because on the no level, it is the mind can want something, and you can also get it, but it's not coming from your true self. So there is a law that our thoughts can be projected and then manifested. Yes, I do see that, and that's not a belief. It's actual, I see that. There are many things that I have wanted in my life and in growing up that I have received because I wanted it so badly. But going through that, some of those things, I saw that they weren't such good experiences. So we can attract something through the mind, and it won't be really what our heart, our consciousness really desires and wants. And usually that consciousness that really desires and wants is not a selfish desire, but is a desire that would be not of and for ourself. And then in that sense, that manifestation is a sacred manifestation. It's a holy manifestation. Have you ever heard of the saying, be careful what you wish for?
I think I know what it means, but I've not really heard it.
Okay. So what do you think it means?
Can you say it again?
Be careful what you wish for.
To be exact of what you want, or I'm not sure.
Okay, so the saying, be careful what you wish for, means that you could want something. I'm just trying to find an example that you could maybe relate to. I want 10 chocolate ice creams. Oh boy, I really want that.
So do I.
Okay, so it was a good one. Must have been channeling you. So I want 10 chocolate ice creams. And I get 10 chocolate ice creams. So I'm eating 10 chocolate ice creams, and then suddenly I get sick and I throw up. So it means sometimes our mind, we think we might want something, and then we can get it, so we can manifest it, but then it's not really good for us. However, if you were really connected to the being instead of the desire of what the mind and maybe the ego desires, then you might have said, oh, I'll have 1 chocolate ice cream. And you may eat the whole chocolate ice cream, that one, or you might just have 3 bites and say, that's enough. I don't want any more. Because you've been fulfilled. It's the manifesting from consciousness rather than from the mind is completely different, and the experience will be completely different. Your will is completely different because it is no longer, when you're manifesting from consciousness, it's not your will, but thy will. Thy will be done. You know that saying from the Bible, thy will be done? So it means it's God, it's consciousness, it's Christ, it's the Buddha, your Buddha nature that is wanting this. And it's not even so much of a want because it won't be a want in the same way. There may be a want because we are a human being, so just example of that ice cream, if you're from consciousness, and we have a human being, so we have these little human cravings. Chocolate ice cream, but it won't be 10. It'll be 1 or a half or just a bite. So does that help you?
Yes.
What do you want to manifest, by the way?
Well, I play tennis.
Wonderful.
And I have a vision board. And I even make little trophies made from paper, just using staplers and crayons.
So you want to become a tennis pro?
Yes.
Ah, well, that's not a bad thing to want to manifest. I mean, this is something that a desire that you have. So I would say go for it, Just don't think that when you get it, it's going to make you completely happy. You'll receive and get some happiness from it, especially, say, if you win, you go, yeah, right, I won. But life is about challenges, and it's about learning. So there'll be times that maybe you won't win, and you'll have to learn from that. So when you do your vision board, it's best when you make these vision boards that you also leave it open to the universe. Okay, I'll give you an example. When I was kind of through the different men, I decided to make a list of what I wanted in a man. And I actually got it. And I got Eckhart. But what we try to manifest and what we try to think we want is never complete. Because I forgot to put, I want somebody who cooks. I'm serious. I mean, when you're in a relationship, you're thinking, if you don't want to do all the cooking yourself, well, at least I didn't. And I didn't put down, I wanted a man to clean. I listed other aspects, which I got. So we're always on a human level going to forget something. So this is what I mean by, it won't quite make you completely happy, but you can receive and get happiness from it. Just, leave it also open to the universe. When we make goals, it's okay to make a goal, but then leave it open because maybe life knows better than we do. So we make a goal, but we kind of just leave it open-ended. Many years ago, as Eckhart was growing in his talks, there was an organizer, and he said to me, he rented I can't remember, I think it was like a 2,000 venue size that held 2,000 people. And I was talking to him on the phone, and he said, I'd be happy if I got 1,000 people. I didn't say anything, but I thought, well, why did he rent a 2,000 venue if he would be happy with 1,000? I didn't say anything. I just went, oh, okay. Anyways, we got 1,000 people. He got his 1,000 people. But what would happen if he said, I'd like to fill this venue, but then just leave it. Leave it to the universe. Whether it filled or whether it didn't fill, it didn't matter. It's the universe that is in action when we want the will of the universe. Have that. Make that your primary focus. So you can have this wish and desire to be a pro tennis player. It's wonderful. I used to love tennis myself. So that's wonderful, and you make that vision board. But then in your own mind's eye, also leave it open. Leave yourself open. And just say, I want this, but I'm also okay with having more, and I'm also okay with having less. I want the will of what's best for me as consciousness coming through this form, this body, this mind. Because maybe there's something even greater for you, and you just don't know that yet. We can't foresee that. So you just make those goals, but leave it open for the will of God. And that God is you. It's within you.
Thank you.
Does that help you?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
It is madness to argue with is. It is. Intelligent action arises if the starting point is alignment with what is internally. The nature and function of challenges and difficulties in the evolutionary process. We can use the term challenge, which already has a positive spin to it. Something happens and you call it, it's a big challenge. But without the positive spin, you would say, it's really bad. It's so bad what has happened. Then you become more spiritual and say, I'm faced with a challenge. Okay. Now, challenges come in many forms. There's no human life that is not profoundly challenged in one way or another. Some humans are challenged by physical challenges, difficulties. Other humans are usually challenged by dreadful psychological challenges and their own minds. Personal challenges in your personal life, collective challenges that affect millions of people at the same time, all in various ways. We've just had one. So it seems that many things are almost designed in one's life to stop you from evolving or becoming more conscious. And many people say, if I only had surroundings, if I lived in a place that was peaceful and calm, and my needs are met, my basic needs are met, and I got pure food and everything else, so I don't have to worry about things anymore. If I could only live in this perfect environment, I could really make spiritual progress. If I only had that, but I don't. I can't. And no matter what stage you're at, always obstacles arise continuously. Sometimes things go well, and then another obstacle goes, and then they go well again. Oh, obstacles come in many, many forms: physical, relationship, financial, home situation, all kinds of things. Pandemic is a collective one, and other collective ones most likely coming soon. The strange thing is, evolution happens only when faced with obstacles. That happens on every level, physical level, every level. It's only when an obstacle is encountered that there's a call for more energy, and then more energy flows in, and whatever the frequency of energy could even be physical. For example, if you want to have a stronger body, it's not going to happen if you lie on your sofa every day drinking beer and watching Netflix. You can say, I want a stronger body. Yeah, well, it's not happening. Now, what do you have to do to have a stronger body? To put it in strange terms, you have to, at first, you have to make life difficult for your body. For example, you go jogging, and you think, I wish I was watching Netflix on my sofa, but and the body doesn't like it. But you say, and then you lift a weight. But you're making life difficult for your body, very difficult. But only then it happens, your body then demands more energy, and an influx of energy comes that eventually is translated into muscle growth and so on. And then a point comes when you actually more energy has come, then you suddenly enjoy that. But the enjoyment is preceded by experiencing difficulty and obstacle. On every level, humans evolve. Many, many people here, I know that from what people have told me, it's always the case. Many of you would not be here if you had not encountered very difficult life situations, either through loss or breakdown of relationships, loss of loved ones, serious physical illness, accident. Many people have told me I would never have come or realized what this is about if I hadn't gone through this difficult period in my life. It's then there's an influx of energy that comes, and at the highest level, it is an increase in consciousness. As you're faced with difficulties, some difficulties can be removed on a practical level. Many other difficulties require an increase in consciousness for you to overcome them or transcend them. I've had correspondence from people in prison, some are in prison for life, and they've said, I have awakened through coming into contact with this teaching. I have awakened, and I am free in a prison cell. So it is in your comfort zone. It is the very unlikely that the awakening will happen to any human being as long as they remain in their comfort zone. Perhaps if they had, this is the last incarnation, they've already gone through an enormous amount of evolution in previous lifetimes, and then perhaps at a very early age they can already awaken. But most humans, they do not awaken as long as they're in their comfort zones. Oh, it's good enough. Oh. Comfort zone is not all that happy, mostly, but at least it's not too bad. But when you're taken out of your comfort zone, that's where evolution happens, the evolution of consciousness. So in other words, you need the bad to evolve. Sorry. Yeah. And life doesn't leave you alone. Even after awakening, you got challenges come. Oh my God. But what changes is, and this is important, that you no longer demand that the world should leave you alone and should make you happy. It can't. As long as you think it should, and there was something wrong when you're being challenged by this or that, you think there's something deeply wrong with my life. I'm being challenged. Or in other words, I'm experiencing all these difficulties. And so then you realize you drop the demand that the world should make you happy. Because the world isn't here for that. It's here to make you conscious, to awaken you. And it does that by confronting you with difficulties, one after another. Now, some difficulties are so bad that they kill you. That's true. That could happen. And then you get another chance after that. It was perhaps the philosopher Nietzsche who said, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. There's some truth to that. So when challenges happen, the important thing is, how do I meet this challenge? With what state of consciousness do I meet this challenge? And that determines the further development of that particular situation also. If you're able to meet a challenge consciously instead of reactively, then quickly it becomes transformed also externally as a challenge. To meet it consciously means, in the first instance, to accept this moment as it is, no matter what it presents you with, no matter what form this moment takes. You accept this moment as it is, because you might as well, because it already is. It is madness to argue with is. It is. Of course, then you can, what can you do about it? If you need to take action or can take action, intelligent action arises if the starting point is alignment with what is internally. This is what is, and then you act if action is needed. Right action will arise. But if immediately you go into reactivity, you make the situation worse than it is. You often amplify something bad and becomes even worse and worse through reactivity. You can verify this when dealing with an unconscious human. If you react to their unconsciousness, then you yourself become more unconscious and you make them more unconscious and you get huge drama. And again, collectively too, when faced with a difficulty, how aware can you be when you are prior to taking action? Are you just reacting, or are you able to be aware, which means is wisdom present? We haven't mentioned this word before, but it's inseparable from what we're talking about. Wisdom is the higher intelligence that operates through you when you're in touch with the vertical dimension. All you have when you're not in touch with the vertical dimension, you might have the clever human mind that can work things out in a very limited way. But wisdom is not there. Wisdom can seize the totality of the situation, and in taking action, it considers immediately other consequences of their action in the totality. And not through breaking things down, but there is the same way in which you remember we talked about the two modalities of knowing, conceptual and direct knowing through awareness. And that applies here too when you look at a problem that needs solving. You look at, is there wisdom in what you do or just mental cleverness? And anything you do when you react to a problem, then if you will make it worse, or you solve one problem and create 4 or 5 others in the process of solving one. So the world drama gets amplified through the egoic reactivity that always says, this should not be happening, not aligned with the present moment. So wisdom is what the world needs, and wisdom can only come through awareness. And that is the deeper modality of knowing. Intelligence is not enough. The world is full of intelligent people, so-called. I mean, really, if you really look, is that intelligence? And they're creating that. What are they doing? They got their university degrees, so I suppose in conventional terms, we have to call it intelligence. And then they're creating havoc on the planet. No wisdom. An increase in intelligence will not save us, or an increase in knowledge. What's more? Wisdom, only wisdom can, and wisdom is inseparable from awareness, the arising of awareness. It's from the dimension of the vertical dimension of depth, not through thinking. So when you look at a situation and you are able to be alert and still, you look. And then the realization of what action is the right action comes.
You maybe have heard the Latin famous dictum I don't know who first created it, must be some Roman philosopher. Per aspera ad astra, which translates as through adversity to the stars. Adversity could also be translated as difficulty. Through adversity, through difficulty, through suffering, you could say, through adversity to the stars, which means, of course, as obviously the wisdom embedded in this is that you only grow through adversity, through difficulties, just like the body. And you don't have to seek it out, as I said before. Some people do, and there is a tradition in many spiritual traditions, in Christianity and many other religions, probably all. There is a very ancient tradition by which the practitioner seeks out suffering rather than tries to avoid suffering. That's the ascetic tradition in religions. It existed very strongly in early Christianity and in medieval Christianity, and still exists in other religions, still exists strongly in India. And that is, sometimes it involves being homeless, having no possession, being totally at the mercy of what you are given by other people, or it could involve doing something strange, like sitting on top of a pillar or a pole for years on end. The weirdest things. So I can see why they do it, although Western people, when they look at it, or they look back into their own past, the Middle Ages, they say, how could people be so crazy to do something like that? They starve themselves, they get close to death, they inflict suffering on their body, they shut themselves in a cell, as Christian medieval monks often did. They go to a cave. They were the desert fathers in very early Christianity in North Africa, who lived out in the desert and would live on locusts they became, some of them became spiritual teachers. People would come to them. To some extent, that still exists in India, outside of the big cities, which are becoming, of course, modernized. But that tradition is still very much alive in India. I can see why they do this. It's also in Zen. If you go to a Zen monastery, it's pretty austere and harsh. The conditions are harsh and austere. The meditation practice is done by facing a wall in many places. You sit in front of a wall and you meditate. And in the winter, they might even open the windows, so you get really cold. And so it's a dreadful situation to be in. I mean, you wouldn't normally choose that for yourself, but they choose it. The idea behind it was probably when humans first came up with this idea that imposing suffering on yourself can bring about a change in consciousness. That is the idea behind it, that it becomes the spiritual practice. It probably arose in certain humans who had gone through suffering. Not they didn't choose it, but life gave it to them. And then they realized that at some point they experienced the spiritual awakening. And then they looked back and said, how did that happen? I suffered and suffered, and life became so hard for me, and then something inside me suddenly switched, and there was another dimension was suddenly there. Okay, so they began to understand the relationship between the suffering that was spontaneous, natural suffering arising in their life situation, and what happened to them. And then they attracted naturally people who could sense that they had something that other humans didn't have, so they attracted those. And then they came up with the idea of recreating what happened to them naturally in a more formal, artificial environment, so to speak. In other words, they created a spiritual center where they made people suffer. And so that became the spiritual tradition in many Christian and Hindu and the Sufis also in Islam. They wander from place to place wearing the simplest of clothes and have no home. I can see why, but it's not the path I would suggest that is right for most of you, unless you absolutely feel that it's right for you. Then it's fine, then you probably wouldn't be here, you would be in meditation boot camp, or you would be in a Zen monastery. It would be your 10th year of suffering in a Zen monastery, and still asking the master, I didn't quite get it. Can you explain again what this is all about? As one philosopher said, I think his name was Alan, his first name was Woody, is Woody. He said, life is full of heartache, misery and suffering, and it's over all too soon. So the important thing in all this is, whenever you encounter difficulties, use them as part of, incorporate them into your spiritual practice instead of resisting them. Just making sure that the difficulty is a true difficulty that you encounter, rather than a difficulty that is produced exclusively, almost exclusively in your mind. Many problems only exist in your mind. You need to be able to tell the difference between something that is truly a challenge and something that is only something that's happening in your unconscious mind. By unconscious I mean thought movement and no awareness. Like the guy, our friend from Seinfeld that we saw last night, George. He gives the most wonderful examples throughout the episodes of Seinfeld of somebody who is totally in his ego. So he's experiencing problems that don't exist. What does it matter what bathroom stalls, what kind of doors there are on bathroom stalls? It doesn't matter whatsoever, but it becomes a problem for him. His ego is in it, and it could even lead to the end of his relationship with his girlfriend. Totally insane. But it's actually very normal. That's why I showed it last night. You create a mental position, and then you identify with it. And then it regains it's not even that you create it. It creates itself. And then you are possessed by a thought. And then you are the thought.
And then you're fighting some other thought in somebody else. And by fighting, it gets stronger.